In 2009, Universal Studios Florida was desperate for a visual icon that could compete with massive coasters next door at Islands of Adventure. They wanted something that was loud, tech-heavy, and something that had never really been done before. What they got was a 167-foot vertical climbing, non-inverting, song-blasting monster that redefined the park's skyline. But behind the bright lights and the pop soundtracks was a project plagued by delays, a manufacturer that was in over its head, and a ride experience so notoriously janky it earned the name Rip Ride Rattle. Although today the music has finally come to a stop, this is the complete history of Hollywood Rip Ride Rockit, from its ambitious birth to its fiery demolition for something even bigger. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the history that I'll uncover in today's video. These videos take quite some time to produce, so if you wouldn't mind hitting that subscribe button, hitting the like button, and letting me know down in the comments below what you want to see me cover next, it would help me out a lot. So first we're going to talk about the design phase of this roller coaster. What was seen to many as a $45 million gamble, the manufacturing choice had a big part to play in that. Universal chose Maurer attractions based out of Munich, Germany, because they were known for their small X-car coasters, but Universal asked them to build a mega version of this. It was a $1 million cheaper bid than B&M, but it would cost them millions more in the long run if they ended up going with B&M. Universal's biggest requirement for this ride wasn't just height or thrill, it was how many people they could push through the queue in a certain amount of time. They needed a designated people eater to handle the massive crowds at the front of the park. One thing that Universal did to help with this was the moving walkway system that was in place when you were boarding the train. Most coasters stop a train, let the people out, let the people in, and then send it, which takes a lot of time as we all know. Rip Ride Rockit used a continuous loading system, kind of like the Omnimover that Disney perfected. The trains never stopped moving. They rolled at roughly 2 miles per hour while guests stepped onto a synchronized moving walkway. This created a very big technical struggle in the first few years. This required frame-perfect timing. If a guest took too long to sit down, the dispatch would fail, causing a cascade where every train on the track would have to stop at once. This is why you often saw the ride break down for 10 to 15 minutes at a time. It was usually just the center trip of the loading dock. Now, I personally remember a lot of times waiting in line for this ride, getting towards the front, seeing the train right there, and you saw the one person took a few more steps than they should have, and then the whole ride had to stop, which took another 10 to 15 minutes to rotate through. Perhaps the most iconic thing about this attraction was the 90-degree lift hill to save space in the tight area that they were given to send people up 167 feet in the air. To do this, the engineering needed a high-speed chain lift with a massive anti-rollback system that sounded like a machine gun as you climbed. Because the train is vertical, the weight distribution is entirely on the back of the wheels and the rider's spines, which required Maurer to reinforce the chassis far beyond their standard X-car specs. I still remember the first time that I rode this ride, I kind of almost underestimated the lift hill. I didn't think that the 90 degrees would be so different, but it really was really unique compared to any other ride that I've been on. Another very iconic part of this ride was the illusion of the inverting loop. At the time, non-inverting loops were a theoretical concept, but Rip Ride Rockit really made them a reality. How it works. In a standard loop, you either enter at the bottom, go over the top, head down, and exit. In the double take, the track twists 180 degrees as it climbs, you reach the peak of the loop sitting upright, looking at the sky, and then the track twists again on the way down, which is what Rip Ride Rockit had. So theoretically, you never went upside down fully, but it really did feel like it. But why did Universal want to do that? Universal wanted the look of a massive loop for the park's skyline, but they wanted to avoid the actual intensity and height requirements needed of a traditional inversion loop. When you experience it in person, it creates a weird sensation of lateral hang time instead of being pushed back into your seat by G-forces. You feel more like you're being pulled out of the side than being pushed back down. It remains as one of the most photographed coaster elements in the world because of how controversial it was. To this day, even after its demolition, I still see people online arguing whether or not it was a full inversion, which I find kind of silly because there's all of this proof out there that it really isn't a full inversion. Although that it really does feel like one, it's statistically and factually not. But hey, to each their own, I guess. Now getting into the really unique and fun stuff was the onboard audio, which was kind of a pre-iPad tech nightmare. In this part of the video, we'll emphasize how ambitious this was for the time of opening of 2009. You have to remember, in 2009, the iPhone was barely 2 years old. There were no iPads. Universal had to custom build a touchscreen interface that could survive 5G, forces, rain, humidity, vibration, and the Florida sun. As you could imagine, that was pretty difficult for them to do. Although they pulled it off spectacularly for the time, it just couldn't sustain long term. To maintain 12 digital seats, one at each of the 12 on each train, it had to have a central computer built into the ride system and a high fidelity speaker system that was built into the headrest, which also long term wasn't able to hold up that well. This kind of created a problem regarding to power. Since the trains aren't really connected to a direct power line, they had to use a connect rail in the station to quote unquote charge the audio system and then use capacitors to keep the music playing for the 90-second duration of each cycle. Now, I think the most unique aspect of this whole ride was the secret menu within these iPads. This was the Easter egg that gave the ride its cult following. By holding the ride logo down for 10 seconds on the screen, you could unlock a 3-digit keypad. This allowed you to access over 60 hidden musical tracks that Universal didn't want to pay the main menu licensing fees for. Everything from Led Zeppelin to Kanye West, Kendrick Lamar, and the Muppets. Yes, you heard that right, the Muppets. You could actually listen to The Rainbow Road sung by Kermit while you're riding a very intense roller coaster, which was an interesting experience when I did that. Now, my personal favorite off the secret menu was the code 182, which played a variety of Blink-182 songs, and I thought those fit very well with the coaster. But the fact that you could sit there and choose from a wide variety of all of these different types of music from all of these different genres on a really big roller coaster at Universal Studios, that made the ride so much fun. Although over at Guardians at Epcot, you can't choose the ride, there's still music on the ride, but it's just not as fun as getting to pick your own song that you have a connection to while riding such a fun attraction. I don't know. I guess I just like how personalized you could really make the whole experience. Now we'll get into some of the unfortunate history of this attraction. Before a single piece of track was even bolted down, the project hit a pretty big wall. The incident during early excavation in the groundbreaking phase, construction crews accidentally ruptured a massive 30-inch water main. Millions of gallons of water surged through the production central and New York areas of the park. It wasn't just a small puddle, it was a huge mess that forced the temporary closure of several surrounding attractions and gift shops. For the local theme park community, this was the first sign that Rip Ride Rockit was going to be a difficult birth. It caused an immediate halt to construction while the infrastructure of the park's busiest section was being repaired. There was what seemed to be infinite delays in the process of building this attraction. Universal had marketed a 2009 spring opening, but spring came and went pretty fast, and the coaster sat silent. The core of the delay was the moving walkway component and the block zone system. Because the cars were intended to never fully stop, the ride's computer system had to track the exact position of up to 7 or 10 trains simultaneously. If one car was off by a fraction of a second, the computer, fearing in a collision, would e-stop the entire ride. Although they aimed for a spring opening, it didn't end up getting technical rehearsals until August, and it was a disaster. The ride would open for 20 minutes, break down for 2 hours, then reopen for 10. Guests spent more time watching technicians climb the lift hill than actually riding. This period of technical rehearsals became legendary for its inconsistency, further bruising the ride's reputation before it even opened. Now, I've been to Universal Studios Florida quite a bit, and I remember always trying to be in ride for Rip Ride Rockit, and it was always broken. Every time that I've been, it's been broken at least one day of my vacation. I've always seen technicians there. It's always closed because of wind. It's always closed because of an e-stop or something else is wrong with the attraction. It just didn't hold up long term like people would have hoped. Now for this next portion, I don't know how true these are, but I've seen a few stories about this on the internet, so I thought it might be cool to share with y'all, but keep in mind that This might not fully be true. I've just seen this from a few sources, and I'm not saying whether it's true or not. I am just simply telling the story. So there is an urban legend that I've heard quite a bit about. I don't know how true it is again, but shortly after the ride opened, a story began to circulate in the coaster community that a lead engineer or project manager had taken their own life due to the immense professional pressure and the failure that the ride had opened to. While there have been numerous tragic incidents involving employees at various theme parks over the decades, this specific engineer suicide story is largely considered an urban legend fueled by the ride's notorious cursed development stages. However, the fact that this story even exists at all highlights how toxic and high stakes the atmosphere surrounding the ride's construction period was. It was added to a layer of dark energy to the ride that fans still kind of discuss today. This attraction had to overcome some structural kind of gymnastics to weave through weird areas of the park. The engineering wasn't just difficult because of the tech, it was difficult because of the geography of the location of the attraction. One of the most important examples of this is the literal hole in the wall above the previous Universal Ghostbusters show building. The track literally punches a hole through several soundstage buildings, and this required massive structural reinforcement to ensure the vibrations of a multi-ton roller coaster train didn't cause the older Universal buildings to crumble or interfere with the Blue Man Group show, which was right next door at the time. Another very impressive feat was building the track directly over the main concert stage. Designers had to ensure that the coaster's noise wouldn't drown out live performers, but also making sure the massive supports didn't block the sightlines of thousands of concert goers. This kind of created a claustrophobic thrill where the track feels like it's narrowly missing buildings, but it's also meant that if a single piece of track needed replacement later in life, the logistics are a nightmare. The last point we get into before I start talking about the decline of this attraction is going to be the LED lights within the track and the ride cars. While most coasters use stationary floodlights to illuminate the track, Rip Ride Rockit featured a sophisticated onboard LED lighting package. It was known as the Luma system. As the trains moved, they functioned like glowing streaks of neon that could change colors in sync with music, and it effectively turned the coaster into a kinetic light sculpture that redefined the Universal skyline after dark. Now, we see this at Stardust Racers over in the brand new theme park Epic Universe. Because the lighting system was tied to an individual car audio system, the ride experience became significantly more immersive at night. From the rider's perspective, the glow from the headrests and the side panels reflected off the surrounding soundstage walls and the track itself. This created a high-speed kind of light tunnel that masked the janky visual of the aging track and made the 65-mile-per-hour maneuvers feel significantly faster. Now, before we get into the decline of this ride, I kind of want to say that I never really found it to be super janky. Yeah, a few times I would get off and my head would be a little lightheaded, but I never had back pain like some people claim or anything else in that nature. I don't know if that's to do with being super young or if I just was an exception. Now we'll talk about the maintenance nightmare that came with this ride. The very things that made Rip Ride Rockit unique eventually became its undoing in the future. Because the coaster is weaving through a working movie studio and still so close to the park's edge, noise was a major concern for this ride. To fix this, the hollow steel track was filled with sand and gravel to dampen the roar. While this worked for neighbors, it made the track incredibly heavy. The next aspect is the X-car struggle. The Maurer X-car was designed for smaller, lighter maneuvers. When forced to carry such heavy trains over a sand-filled track at 65 miles an hour, the physics didn't scale well in the long term. The wheels took a beating, often developing really big flat spots. This led to the rattle or the square wheel feeling that plagued the ride for later years. It wasn't just a bump, it was bone-shaking vibration that turned a fun ride into a headache-inducing one for many, many guests. The Rip Ride Rockit name was built on the gimmick of choosing your own soundtrack for your experience, but by the 2020s, the jukebox was nearly empty. Universal initially paid massive fees to artists like Black Eyed Peas, No Doubt, and Kanye West. As those 10-year contracts expired, the legal fees to renew them became astronomical. In late 2023, Universal quietly updated the software, removing nearly the entire library. The secret menu became the only way to hear variety of music. For the average guest, the choice was narrowed down to just one song per genre. The ride that promised your music, your ride, was now playing a very short and very repetitive loop, signaling to fans that Universal was no longer willing to invest into the attraction. By the late 2010s, the hardware that was revolutionary back in 2009 was essentially vintage. Because the train spent all day in the brutal Florida sun, the LCD touchscreens in the headsets began to delaminate and yellow almost. Many screens became unresponsive or developed dead zones, meaning that guests would spend the entire 90-degree lift hill frantically stabbing at the screen that wouldn't even end up letting them pick a song. The speakers were subjected to extreme vibrations and weather for over a decade. It became common to have a blown speaker right next to your ear, turning your chosen soundtrack into a distorted, crackling mess that ruined the immersive personal concert vibe that the ride was actually known for. When the ride opened in 2009, it was marketed as a multimedia experience where you were the star of your own music video. Originally, you could buy a personalized DVD of your ride at the After Ride shop. As digital media ended up taking over, Universal never successfully transitioned this to a seamless mobile experience. The cameras on the train often went unmaintained, and the video DJ character shown in the queue, which felt cool and edgy in 2009, started to feel incredibly dated and cringy to the newer Gen Z audience coming up. The vibrant red track and yellow supports that were iconic for Universal, the Florida UV rays turned the bright red into a dull, chalky kind of pink tone. Frequent spot painting led to mismatched, patchy look in the track that made the ride look poorly maintained compared to the pristine nearby Velocicoaster. When Rip Ride Rockit opened, it felt like it dominated the production central area of the park. However, with the opening of Illumination's VillainCon Minion Blast and the expansion of the Minion Land entrance came to the rock and roll aesthetic of the roller coaster, it started to clash pretty heavily with the bright, family-friendly yellow branding on the front of the park. In efforts to combat the rattle and mechanical wear of the roller coaster, the maintenance teams eventually had to increase the brake run pressure, meaning that the mid-course brake runs, which are the flat sections of track between drops, would trim or slow the train down much harder than before. This killed the airtime and momentum feeling of the second half of the ride, making the finale feel pretty sluggish and boring compared to its high-energy opening in 2009. In late 2024 and early 2025, rumors started becoming reality that the ride would be officially closed. The official closing date was announced for August 18th of 2025. During the 2025 demolition, a fire actually broke out on the lift hill track, a final kind of curse moment for the roller coaster. The transition will be to the Fast and Furious Hollywood Drift roller coaster, and this will be an Intamin spinning coaster, kind of like the one opening up this year in Hollywood, which is a full circle moment since Intamin is a much more reliable manufacturer than Maurer historically. In the last 16 years, it wasn't a classic like the Hulk, but it was a skyline-defining thrill that filled a gap for over a decade in this park. Rip Ride Rockit has been a pretty big part of Universal for me. I started going in 2019, so it's been there ever since I started going. Me and my family also go to Halloween Horror Nights every single year and get an RIP tour. It's kind of our family tradition, and I remember the first year ever going to HHN, we did Rip Ride Rockit probably 10 times in a row. That was one of my most memorable experiences of all time at Universal. Although I'm sad that this won't be lighting up the nighttime sky at HHN or being able to ride it in the scorching sun staring straight up into the sun, lifting up the hill, I am pretty excited to see what Universal has in store for its replacement. Knowing the par of Stardust Racers and Velocicoaster, their two newest roller coasters, if it's on that level or anywhere near it, I think it'll be a much needed upgrade and a very well received one by the fans. So yeah, I'm pretty excited for it. Even though Rip Ride Rockit was a coaster of many contradictions, it was very advanced for the time, but ended up being overall janky. It was loud, but eventually it lost its voice. It stands as a reminder that sometimes being the cheapest or the first doesn't mean that you'll be the best. But for anyone who's ever typed in a 3-digit code into the secret number pad, it will always be a legend for them. Let me know what you guys think of the video down below and what you want me to cover next, and let me know what your favorite song to listen to on Rip Ride Rockit was, and thank you for watching. See ya.